Going to other in testimony that I had invited, and I guess we kind of go down the list. If I'd call, Chair calls Dick Lavine. I apologize. We thought we'd get to you a little bit earlier, Mr. Lavine.
It's all right. It's been good testimony, but yeah, I'm getting a little hungry. So.
Okay. If you would state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill.
My name is Dick Lavine. I'm very senior fiscal analyst at the Center for Public Policy Priorities, here to testify against House Bill 2. And I will address one very narrow aspect of the debate, which is the price index. The argument that's been made a little bit here, much more strongly in the Senate, was that the 8% rollback rate is a relic of a period of high inflation in the early 1980s, and that inflation is much lower now. And it is true if you look at let me start, if the correct way to look at inflation is not the CPI, which refers to things consumers spend money on, which is really mainly housing and also food and transportation. But the thing to look at is a different index that's prepared by the Bureau of Economic Analysis, which is part of the U.S. Department of Commerce, and it's called the State and Local Implicit Price Deflator for Government Consumption Expenditures and Gross Investment. In other words, it's what state and local governments spend their money on. And that has, in the last 10 years, been about 2%. But the last 10 years, have been the 10 years since the global financial crisis. And in fact, there are negative interest rates in Europe. Bond buyers in Europe essentially are paying their government to hold their money for them for a little while and then give it back to them. This is not normal. And we should expect, I hope, that we will go back to a more normal economic situation. So let's look at the 10 years before the global financial crisis, and this price deflator that I mentioned was really running above 4%. So assuming we're going to get back to normal sooner or later, a 4% rollback rate would pretty much let cities and counties tread water. But you really need to give them some headroom to make some improvements and expansions in services. So I think, I don't know a number. Obviously, there are many mayors here happy to work with you on the exact number, but 4 is obviously rock bottom. And that would just allow them to keep doing what they're doing, but not doing it any better or doing any more of it. You need a number higher than that.
Thank you, Mr. Lavine. Members, any questions?
One quick one.
Yes, please, Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the sales disclosure issue that was brought up earlier, what do you think that would do? Because you also serve on an appraisal board.
Well, I was on the board of directors for the Travis Central Appraisal District for a very long time.
Yeah. So what do you think that would do for the appraisal process, and how could that help with what we're trying to do here?
Oh, it would clearly make appraisals more accurate. More information has to help when you're trying to determine what market value is. And it might particularly help in commercial properties because for many residential properties, there's a lot of information available. Not so much in commercial properties. When I was on the board, we asked for a 20% increase in the budget for the appraisal district, very significant increase, but the city and the county and the school district approved of it, and we spent a great deal of that money on very expensive commercial data sources because it wasn't available to us through the current process. With good data, you can figure out the capitalization rate and then use the capitalization rate to use the income approach. The man from the Board of Realtors was concerned that we weren't going to be using that market price is not the right way to evaluate an income producing property, and that's right. But you need a cap rate to apply to that income to determine what a real market value would be, and that's the real advantage of sales price disclosure, besides more accurate appraisals across the board.
Okay, it would save money, I suppose, too.
It certainly would have saved us 20% of our budget.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Members, any other questions? Mr. Lavine, I wish you a happy dinner and thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely.